And our first item is Don Morris Jones, I think.
That's it.
I need to make you a co-host. Let me get that taken care of. So you're now a co-host and you can share your screen. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. All right. Okay. And so what I'm wanting to do is expand this a little more, but maybe I'll just go with this. Okay. All right. So my Norwegian background is on my father's side. Basically, my paternal grandmother, and the family name for that side, or the primary one, is pronounced Osen. It's in Norwegian, it's spelled with a double A, but they anglicized it to Osen when they moved here. And then to explain these pictures to the right, I generated 4 pictures using the AI art tool Midjourney. Just thought that it might be a fun way to kind of visualize what it might what my ancestors experienced or might have been like on a lake, in this case Golden Lake, Wisconsin, and where they built log cabins and stuff like that on their farms. So the name of my my ancestors who actually immigrated here is Olaf Hagensen Assen and Marie Bergerstatter Rieg. And sometimes, like on the ship manifest when they came over, Olaf used just Olaf Hagen as a family surname rather than the whole thing. So part of what's interesting about the way that they immigrated is they were close friends with 4 other families in Norway, and they all sort of collaboratively immigrated over a period of several years. And that started in 1842 and went through 1844. Excuse me? Was there a question? Okay. And they were from Eiker Parish in Drammen, Norway, which was Buskerud County, which is now called Viken. And let's see, and the map over here shows the farm that they lived on, and which is called Paul Sasson. It's quite large. I don't have like I don't have a scale on this map, but I think it's probably about 15 square miles or more. And it was primarily timber-oriented property, but parts of it were also farmed. And one thing that I'm a little puzzled by is that Olaf was the oldest son. And, I know that was a period of time when the Norwegian economy wasn't very good, but it's a little puzzling that he walked away from maybe being the primary heir. Okay. And there's a man named Paul Scholes who was like really helpful, and I got a ton of information from. And the way I got in contact with him his ancestry was giving me hints from his tree fairly frequently. So I sent him a message and explained that I was going to work on on this immigrating ancestor kind of presentation for the Sons of Norway group. And he was real enthusiastic about that and really anxious to share information with me. And so I got a ton from him. And he and a historian from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, had done quite a lot of work, including going to like county offices and stuff like that to collect a lot of the information. And Paul actually lives in the state of Washington, so he was, traveling quite a fair distance to do some of that work. So in 1842, the first family, the Danielsons, migrated, and then their boat went to Milwaukee, and then they walked from Milwaukee to Muskego, which is a Norwegian settlement, and then the husband walked like another 30 miles further to get to the area near Golden Lake. Then in 43, an additional group with kids traveled, and then 1844, my ancestors as well as a group of other people. And then there were two young women who were 22 and 21, and they were actually, I don't know exactly who they were, but they were using the last name of Hagen, and they were traveling with my ancestors, but they weren't actually children. So that's a bit of a puzzle that I don't know the answer to. So the satellite image or aerial image over here shows Golden Lake, and then most of the settlers were on the northeastern corner of the lake. Okay, so it's fairly speculative as to why my ancestors migrated. I don't have any family stories that really clarify that at all. But certainly there were, multiple people who were sort of advocating migration, and possibly they and their friends got excited about that and decided to do it. Okay. So one of the things that Paul Schulz and the historian did to confirm relationships between these five families is they looked at church records regarding baptisms and noticed that they were both in Norway and in Wisconsin. They were like sponsoring each other's kids and stuff like that in church. So Olaf and Mary, the husband and wife, and then they had 4 children who were born in Norway, and then they had 6 children who were born in the US. And there is some really interesting memoirs that were written by 2 different ministers that were in the area at the time. And I've read like hundreds of pages from the memoirs, and they give a really, detailed and interesting view of what it was like to be living on the Wisconsin frontier at that period of time. And James Lloyd Breck was the first a clergyman in the area, and he came, at least some of his relatives were quite wealthy. He had an uncle who was a millionaire, which in 1840 would have been like a huge amount of money. And he started a Neshota seminary complex on a lake called Pine Lake. And that included a church, a divinity school, and a church school. And then eventually a Swedish farmer who was sort of a lay preacher or whatever, he also studied at the seminary complex and became a minister, and my ancestors were familiar with both of them. And let's see, and the first thing that was opened was Episcopal, and then eventually there were Lutheran ministers in the area also. But early on, a lot of the settlements, from Norway or other countries did not necessarily have very many English speakers. So typically the minister would go to hold a service, and then somebody at that settlement who was fluent in English as well as Norwegian or whatever would help translate. Another thing that happened with James Breck that was fairly interesting is like a mobile group of Native Americans basically pitched their tents around his complex, and the chief basically wanted one of his rifles, which he gave him the rifle. He had like another 3 or 4, and the chief used the rifle for a number of months and then brought it back. But the memoirs are quite good. So this is a chart by generation of, I bolded the people who have Norwegian background to some degree. So here's the first generation, and then that we talked about, and then the second generation would be the father would be Peter Andrew Osen, went by Andrew, and then his wife was Anna Hildebrand, and she was half German and half Norwegian. Next generation, it's my grandfather, Russell Jones, he was Welsh, and then his wife, Grace Osen, and she was like 75% Norwegian. Fourth generation, it's be my father, see roughly half and half, and then my mother's, whose background is primarily English and Scottish, and also Swedish and Danish, and then there's me in the fifth generation. So, so when they moved to Golden Lake, farmland was typically selling for $1.25 to $1.50, and you'd buy it from a federal office most of the time. And they listed there, in the 1850 census, the Osens listed the value of their real estate owned as $300. And then they moved to Oconomowoc in 1853, and they, I don't know exactly the acreage of the real estate was worth 3,000. I'm guessing it was maybe 700 to 1,000 acres, something like that. And so the family stayed there for a fairly long period of time. And then during the 1900s, some of the Osons like moved to Green Bay and West Bend, Wisconsin, and some others moved to California and in the state of Washington. So the first settler, father, Olaf Olson, died in 1863 at the age of 57. So his wife continued to operate the farm for about 29 years with like help of, some of her sons. And then some of the people became farm equipment dealers. That was true for Andrew Osen, who's in my direct line. So Mary Osen died when she was 79. And I don't have any photos for the first generation of people. So this would be Anna Hildebrand, and then Andrew Osen here when he was younger, here older. And then this is Grace Osen, my paternal grandmother. This is her with brothers when she was a girl. And this was like a wedding photo with my grandfather, Russell Jones. And then there's nothing more Norwegian than winter sports. So the Wisconsin or the Oconomowoc, Wisconsin area was a real strong speed skating area. And other things that were done in the areas, actually, there was a ski jump, which this is a photo of it when it was fairly dilapidated. But my dad was a ski jumper like in the 40s, and not sure exactly when he stopped doing it, but and then I developed with a good friend an ice boat and lots of ice fishermen. And then they actually built a ski hill from a landfill because there weren't really natural hills that were good enough. So that's a little background on the sports thing. And then this is a list of the various references that I used. And again, Paul Schultz was like the most helpful. And I also got a family history report that was done by a cousin that was, and I got that through the Norwegian American Genealogical Center. And that was sort of an updated version of a report that had been done in 1939 that had primarily used an old family Bible as a reference. So, and that's basically it. So, thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. I come from Wisconsin, so I've actually in fact my wife's PhD mentor had a summer house on Golden Lake, and
Oh,
I've been sailing on Pine Lake, and know most of the place names that you used. Are you willing to share your PowerPoint with us?
sure. Yeah. Happy to do that.
Copy.
Great.
I have a suggestion about the two young ladies that came across with your family.
Uh-huh.
I had a similar situation with a great grandmother who came across at about 11, 12 years old with a different family. she called the woman in that traveling family her aunt, but I don't see any evidence for it. I think it wasn't unusual for young women to trade their nanny services or help for passage to get to America. And in my case, there must have been a plan because she was the first in her family to get to America, but the rest of her family, including her parents, showed up within just a few years. So I think there was kind of a longer term plan. They were just the first ones out the door.
Right, right. Yeah.
One of the challenges that we have doing Norwegian geology is that the 1800s and early 1900s, it was very common. If you went to work on a farm, you changed your name to that farm name they
Right.
used. And so the Norwegians, even when they came to the United States, if they moved to a community where there are other Norwegians, sometimes they just changed their name to what was common used in that area. So it makes a real challenge sometimes, because it was not only people who just joined the family, but that was a fairly common thing until Norway passed a law and required the names start to be standardized.
Yeah. I was lucky in the sense that Paul Schultz and this other historian did a lot of work to straighten out the names and figure out who was who and which ones they used at different times and stuff like that. And I think they seem to have done a really good job at that. So that's good.
Would you mind stop sharing?
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, that was pretty interesting.
Thank you.
It's nice to think about these places in southeastern Wisconsin again. I'd like to be back there. Any more questions, comments for Don?
I thought it was really interesting. It's fun to hear and fun to learn about. I have to say I have all these DNA matches from Norway and I have no idea who I'm related to. So I'm still trying to find the connections.
Yeah, that's a lot of us are in similar boats. And not all of them are the boats that they came over in.
I thought the way you presented it was interesting because it's easy to lose track of the generations. So I thought that was helpful, and also seeing all the graphics and the pictures.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, wonderful old photos.
Oh yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
It is kind of puzzling that, say, the oldest son walked away from a good sized farm back in Norway, but I mean, sometimes like my grandfather walked away from farming. He wanted to be a mechanic. He just had enough of farming. Sometimes you just have enough of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, my grandfather came over with his uncle, who was the inheritor and owner of the farm, and gave it up and moved to America with all his kids. So life was tough in those days in Norway, I think.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that 2 children within the 5 families, not my family, died during the first year. So it was definitely tough.
Joel, in the interest of time, considering our packed agenda, I think we need to thank Don. Good work.
Thank you. Oops.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just going to say, Don, I hope you'll continue to join us, even if you're living in South Carolina, or what was it, North Carolina?
North Carolina, yeah. No, I'll definitely do that. I like this group for sure.
So yeah, the next thing on our agenda is Susan Connect, who there she is. Susan, do you want to share your screen and get us rolling here?
Are we there?
Yep.
Okay. When we start talking about brick walls and places that we get stuck, the more I thought about it, the more I realized even though I get stuck with locations and names and dates, the part that I find among the most interesting is learning more, getting stuck about who these people were and what are they like as people. I have one great grandfather, Mr. Flesher here, who came to the United States in 1852, and from my first looking at the stories, seemed to be a well-established, successful gentleman. He came from Norway and was a merchant and agent at the tax and auction house, and he established, let's see, there we go. He established a bookstore. He was a newspaper editor. He was very involved in the church. He was involved in publishing. He worked for the government. He was involved in politics. He ran a window shade business, and he was the Norwegian Swedish either counselor or vice consul for 5 years. So my sense was this was a very solid citizen. But Google has its way of making things change. And I happened upon an autobiography of a fellow named Rasmussen Anderson. He was also well involved in the Wisconsin politic and religious area. And I have begun to appreciate how much conflict and how many problems there were during that period between the religious conflicts and the political conflicts. So when I found this book, there was a chapter on my great grandpa in it, and I thought, oh, that'll be fun to find. So I was able to track it down. I'd seen the contents, and when I found the chapter, it was quite a shock. Apparently Anderson didn't like him at all. That was clear from the outset. He talked about how he came from the educated class. He was well dressed and polished, and he just didn't like those people very much. He was from a farming background, and just there was this real sense of conflict. He, however, Mr. Anderson went on to do very well. He also became a newspaper editor, was also a diplomat. So they had a lot in common, but there apparently was conflict. The first thing he lets you know in his book is that Flesher had committed forgery in Norway and was sentenced to prison for 10 years, then put on probation 3 years later, as long as he went and left the country. I thought, isn't this interesting? Then he describes how when Flesher came to the United States, that he was very involved with the local people, but he talks about 2 sets of incidents. The first one was when he went over to Flesher's printing house and saw his correspondence book. Anderson at this point was applying for a job at the University of Wisconsin, and he saw a letter in Flesher's correspondence book, which he says protested against my being employed and severely attacked my character. It's interesting that he somehow found this letter in the correspondence book when Flesher wasn't there. So I'm not quite so sure what that's all about, but he reports having found this letter when he was over there on an innocent errand. He shared this information with his friend, and he got a couple of his buddies, well-established people, John John Johnson and another fellow to come over, and they threatened Flesher at this point, according again to Anderson in his book, and said they were going to publish his history of the bad things he had done in Norway. Well, they said Flesher then apologized and felt awful and said he now had a wonderful high impression of Anderson. So things were let go, but apparently a few years later, Anderson says he learned that Flesher was basically committing forgeries again, fraud again, and that one of his Flesher's jobs was to work with immigrants coming in. And for example, in this case, these were several people that had been injured and they were supposed to get money from the railroad. And Flesher was the one, as the vice consul and also as a ticket agent, to get that money to these people. Apparently, according to Anderson, he was keeping some of that money for himself. Anderson again brought some people, and he was directed at that point, he was told he had to repay the individuals with interest, resign his office, and leave his businesses and leave Madison. Well, I found this all very interesting, and I wanted to know if indeed there's some way I could prove it one way or the other. So I first looked at his family background. He came from a very successful background, merchants, government officials, churchmen, was successful himself, got married in 1842, and had children. This is an important piece. Had children in 43, 44, 45, and another one at the end of 45. He didn't leave for the United States until 1852. So there's a 7-year gap. Okay, what does that say? He arrived, we don't know when I have not been able to discover when his wife and at that point would be 3 children arrived. But obviously by 1853, because he had another child, 1854, 1855, 1857, 1860, 1862. So obviously Matilda was quite a child bearer, and the children kept coming again once she was there. He did move from Madison in 1872, which is when he resigned his consulship, although he returned to Madison after his wife's death. Family history says he went to Madison not because he got in trouble, but because his wife was ill. I don't know. So I had a lot of trouble trying to find court records. I'm not very good at this, but I, with great joy, found the court records going online, and was able to go and search the digitized records and then the scan materials and their court records. And I know you all understand this. I was beside myself when I found this page by going at the dates and the location that he was. And I don't know if you can see it, but there is 2 notes for Flesher on page 83, and then another list on page 163. Okay, I was able to find the records. Here's 83, here's 163. My biggest problem right now is I can't read them. So I know for sure he did something to get in the court records in those days, but my next challenge is to get these translated. But so I think it makes a lot of sense, circumstantial, that he got in some trouble in Norway, because we have court records for that period when he wasn't having babies, right before he stopped having babies. But so I have a feeling that probably is accurate. But I can't find any support at all of him having problems here. I would like to believe the best of him and think that he came here and he made a fresh start. How many people immigrated and from problems, whether maybe poverty, but maybe law problems? That certainly happened, I'm sure, among many folks, and that he came here and made a fresh start. He obviously couldn't have been in too great of trouble, because how in the world could he have gotten the job of vice consul? but he got all these very good jobs. And because he was the editor of the Immigrant, which was a significant newspaper at the time, and because of his other works, he's mentioned, he gets several pages in various books of the time. And in this particular one, I took the excerpt where it talks about him being a leader with a circle of intellectuals. And it emphasizes how his home was the center for those interested in Norway. That doesn't fit with somebody that had a lot of legal problems. And then I found in the newspaper the sort of the farewell note for when he was leaving to go to the farm. And it talks about the oldest, best known, most highly esteemed citizens. And it talked about an excellent citizen. And in all his positions occupied, showed himself to be a man of integrity and ability. So I have this contrasting piece of this gentleman, whether he was a bit of a shyster and covered it up really well, or whether it was some other issue that he had in conflict with Anderson. And I can't quite figure out how to solve it from there, but it was very satisfying to find the court records in Norway. And so in this particular case, I thought it was worthwhile sharing because it emphasized to me how often you start off on one journey and you're trying to track something down, and then something pops up and puts you off in another corner. So that's the story of my great grandfather. There he is. And I have not yet solved several of those issues.
Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, very interesting. It's looking into sources that we don't usually look at. So that's I think that's probably helpful to all of us. I've tried to look into some of those kinds of sources, and it may be that they're better around Oslo or Kristiansand than places where I've been looking, but it's very interesting.
I thought it was so useful that at the front of each court book, it had an index. And so even though I couldn't read the court records and I'll have to get help on that, you can find them in the index. So that was really useful. And of course, the newspapers you find bits and pieces. Just a small off the topic, is looking at her daughter, at his daughter, who I don't have very little information on. She died early. I did find one newspaper article about the state farm in which she displayed her butterfly collection. So it's fun how you can get little pieces. And that's one of the few pieces of color I have about her, but that she collected butterflies was great fun to learn.
Interesting. Oh, do you mind stopping sharing?
I'm trying to, I'll be happy to once let's see.
Your guy is such a strong contrast compared to my Norwegians, who are basically farmers for a couple of generations, not terribly interesting. And here you have this charismatic guy to research.
I'm trying to find stop share. Forgive me. I see it up at the top, but my little thing won't go. If worse comes to worse, I'll just leave.
No, don't do that.
I can't. It's right there. It's a red thing.
Should just say stop.
It says stop share, but my pointer won't go there. Yours. If I have to, I'll just turn the computer off.
Susan,
Yeah.
you were able then, it's hard to read the court records, but you were able to find some dates that correlated then with his departure.
I was.
Any names other names that you could pick out in the Terrible text.
If you go to that, if you go to court records, if you go to, you know, I can't pronounce it, Archivert, and that you go down to the next page where it says search digital records, and then you go to scan material, and then you go to court records, you can find all the different books of, I'm gonna have to leave. I'm sorry, I can't get out of here. Well,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'll see if I can zoom back in. I'm gonna turn the computer off. I don't know what else to do. Okay, shut down. There we go. Did that do it?
Yeah, I think so.
No, we're still seeing her screen.
Are you still seeing my screen?
No,
The
that's
mountains.
Somebody else's screen. Is
Joel's. That's Joel's screen.
Oh, that's Joel's screen. Oh, okay.
that a good thing?
We don't want that.
Well, can you?
Let me, there we go.
Oh. Are we all fixed?
I think so.
Ah,
Hi, Lori. Glad you were able to join us. I think we'll go ahead with the website presentation with Alexis and I, and then we'll get to your brick wall. Is that okay? Do we have more questions for Susan?
Yeah, just how did you find those court books?
if you go to, I'm gonna spell it, Arkivverkt. Okay, the Norwegian Archives thing.
Mhm.
And then on that, either on that page, it's, if you go scroll down, you get search digital records.
Okay,
Click on search digital records and you go down to the bottom and it says scan materials. It says scan materials. So you click on scan materials. And then it will open up to court records and parish records and all the different records. Many of them we're familiar with, but it has the one that says court records. And when you click on court records, you get that nice column on the left that says area, date, you know, which county are you in, which is the date. And I just put in the place he was from, and I put in the range of dates, 1840 something to 1850 something. And I was able to find the book. So I went, the front on each book, the front page is the contents. So then I had to go, I went through a couple of years, but then I found him.
great, thank you.
Sure. It was really exciting. It really was.
I think it's another lesson that there's a lot more over there in these digitized records than we appreciate. So it's a good lesson for all of us to just keep digging until you find what you're looking for. Do you want to share your screen, Alexis, or should I have the PowerPoint, but it's better if you're at home.
One moment. Here we go.
So we've undertaken a kind of a review of our website and are looking for a way to organize it so that it better represents the things that we'd like to make available. And so Alexis has done a really great job of going through and identifying sections and figuring out another way to present things. So I'll let her take over.
Okay, thanks. As Joel indicated, we have undertaken an effort to look at the existing GIG website and look for ways to make it more helpful. And so the other weekend, it was so hot and humid out, I stayed inside and decided I was going to take a crack at the organization and content of what is currently under links and resources. And I just went to town, if you will. And basically, by the time I was done, And in talking with Joel about the organization of the new content, we, in essence, had the workings of 10 tabs underneath the gig homepage. And from educational resources for beginners or for continuing ed, work quality considerations for understanding the different types of records, whether indirect, direct, vital, etc. Resources and research aids, which is what we usually talk about, you know, the various Norwegian sources, the resources and access points to information in the US. And then what is the variety of options we have for storing our family tree information and program aids, whether we want to be online or whether we do not want to be online and we want to keep it on a CD or just on your home computer. And then I've been talking a little bit with Carolyn, who's our lodge librarian, and they're building the list of the Big to Book holdings, not only for themselves, but I hope for us as well. Cultural skills, and Katya, I think I saw you here for this Zoom meeting. I put together a bit on that to encourage members of the gig to undertake at least one PIN. A bunch of information on genetic genealogy, and then miscellaneous support, like where's the charts that tell you I'm the 4th cousin twice removed from my 10th uncle or whatever. How to read Gothic script, and maybe there's an online course, etc. And tab number 9 is something we'll talk about shortly, but Joel and I are hoping gig members would be willing to assist us with that. And then at the outset of the Zoom call, you may have heard Joel mention he is actively pulling together a more complete archive of the gig meetings, content, and presentations for our general reference. So that's the current plan, according to Joel and I. And after the next slide, and we can talk a little bit, I'd appreciate some feedback. And the next slide is actually going to request some gig member help for some portions of the content. So most of the content is already prepared if it's acceptable to the lodge management. And at this point, we're looking to give some greater depth and county-specific resource information. And I'm wondering if gig members would be willing to assist us in identifying the counties who have historical societies or genealogical societies and get us the names, the links to those web pages, and if they have a journal where there could be manuscripts that talk about some of our ancestors or particular events that would have impacted our ancestors, what those journal locations are. And the similar thing, item B, which would be traditional districts underneath those counties. I've got a few already from my own researches, but Norway's got a lot of land to cover and lots of counties, and I haven't worked in most of them. The third item was actually specific to gig members. Would you be interested and willing to share with us, to put on the webpage, your favorite sources and websites? And my thinking is, if members are willing, to give you attribution, like, you know, Harry says he loves this site and this source because, and then the reasons why. And then lastly, we've had some discussion between Joel and myself about the difficulty in finding some big books. Now, the library is building their list of existing holdings, But relative to the entirety of, I don't know how many, 3,000 or whatever there are, if individual members would be willing to share which Big to books they have, and possibly in a trial way, be willing to help other gig members, and we can see if that might assist members to look up names. Are they in the book that they thought they were in? Maybe scan a page or two and email it, something like that. So these are the 4 topics where we would love to get your help, and especially feedback. So I'd like to open it at this point for some discussion and thoughts from the gig members.
You could also add the Bigdalogs, links to the Bigdalogs in America that link back to the regional districts in Norway. They each have Facebook pages and websites. And have you heard of the Bigdalogs?
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's not quite the same as the Big to book.
No,
But it sounds good.
but it.
But
if you look
there-
at-
I got that in some of the content, yeah. Thank you.
What about a list of people that are good resources? I, for example, long ago met the woman who was then head of the whole genealogical society for the country of Norway, and I've still been in touch with her. I last saw her in 2018, but so sometimes like a really thorny question or something, she might be willing to try to give us some guidance on. But there are probably other people like that. I know in the Swedish world, there are all kinds of people that we sort of rely on. And the other is anybody familiar with the Norwegian version of DIS? We use a lot in Swedish, and it was originally created by a man I know in Sweden, but then a man in Norway helped him get it onto the internet back when the internet came about. And that's where people share their trees, and the software will match you. When you submit your tree, then you get a report, and it's supposed to also exist in Norway, but I haven't tried to find it.
Okay, are you talking about trying to interpret the results of your DNA test results?
No. This is a website where people voluntarily submit their family trees, and then the software will find, when you first do it, then the software finds the matches with other people's who have submitted their trees, and you get a report back, and then you can also use that information all the time to check on things. But I don't know how developed or how useful the Norwegian version is.
I think that there was a DIS Norge, and it's become Slekt og Data, which is the major genealogical society in Norway. I don't know if that's where the person you have contact with is connected. We have a connection there through Liv Brigitte Christensen, who spoke to our group a couple of times last year. But yeah, that's definitely. I don't know of a way to share family trees within that structure. But
I'll check with my contact in Sweden and see if that's still possible in Norway.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you, Donna.
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
One aspect of this, especially when we start talking about the Bigdalogs and other kinds of things, is Norway has just reorganized their entire county structure again, and a lot of the records go back to older designations for regions and counties and so forth. So we need to have a way to kind of cross-reference so that if you're looking for Hordaland, you find out it's Vestland, and I mean, so it starts to get a little bit complicated, but we could use some help in trying to sort some of that out.
Yeah, because my thought is that for each of us, if we're working in 1 or 2 counties, by the time we would tally up how many different counties that is, and each of us, send in a little bit of information, then we build a rather robust source for information that could be accessed by the GIG website.
Family Search has really good resources about that. That you can go and go to a country or a part of the country, and then it breaks it down, and especially useful when the records are under that old system, right? They will tell you, lead you to that old system.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about counties per se, but the genealogical societies, and those are not.
Oh, no, I thought I was just responding to what Joel said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my advice always is go to Family Search first. You can find most of what you need about locations in Norway.
So are members interested at all about sharing your favorite sources in websites, and by doing so, personally help build the content of the website?
Sure.
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 Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so C is a yes. All right.
We'll send out an email with my email address and Alexis and Alex Tucker, our web master, to everybody. So you have those email addresses, and you can respond with some suggestions and websites and all that kind of stuff.
And do you want us to send you the names of the Big to Book that we have? And I guess, are you going to we wouldn't put our individual emails on the website though for people to contact. Is there a way to do that without publishing our information, or?
Yes, we can act as the sort of clearinghouse for that kind of stuff. That's not a problem. I may call on Carolyn, our librarian, to help us with that, but one way or another, we'll make sure that yeah, you don't need to put yourself out there on the internet.
I think
Put a link in the chat that's got the Family Tree Magazine's 2023 list of genealogical websites. Not all Norwegian, but a lot of it is useful for Norwegian access.
Yeah.
part of what's going to help is during our presentations, there seems to be I would pick up a clue. No matter who's presenting, there's always some gem involved, and it's a question of recognizing that gem and documenting it and putting it on that list that you're talking about. And it doesn't always, like, the light bulb doesn't always go on right away, but I just wanted to throw that out there. A lot of things happen in our meetings, but nobody says, aha, that's a good one. Let's put that on the list. You know what I'm saying? We've probably all heard dozens of ideas, like going back to the big to logs, and they're not big to books, but you know what? Those big to logs have their own libraries full of big to books. I belong to probably 5 or 6 here in the Midwest. They all have their own library.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys knew that. The Norwegian world in the Midwest is totally disjointed. I must belong to 10 different organizations that relate to Norwegianness. And they have nothing, they have a lot of common members, but no commonness to organization. They have a lot of big to books spread out, but not in any organized fashion whatsoever. So
Do they share their
I applaud your wanting to pull it together, but it's hard to like even for me here in the Midwest. It's hard for me to pull everything together in my head. There's so many possibilities running around here, and it kind of boils down to bumping into somebody and say, hey, I got this problem, and they say, oh, go to this list. Oh, go to this website. Oh, join my group. Oh, there's a library here. Oh, that's why we get together, right, on these kind of things. And yeah,
I this is not a direct response, Alan, but this is a point to advertise our next meeting in September. Thanks to, in a lot of the meetings we've had, there's always somebody who says, why don't we get the Library of Congress to do something? And, we've contacted them and so forth, but now finally, Alexis has been successful in finding us the Nordic Studies director at the Library of Congress, who also happens to be a St. Olaf graduate, so he's sort of in the club. And he's going to speak in September. So I think that'll be a really great meeting. I don't think they have that many bigger books there either. But
No. Okay, so at this point, I take that there's, based on the lack of any verbal reaction, A and B are moot. C is possible, some people may contribute, and D is possible, some people may contribute. And so with that, I will stop sharing.
Thanks,
Yes, the question
Alexa.
I would have is how do we know what's already there and existing, so we're not replicating? I mean, and is there some way to
What's already where?
in terms of what, I guess the website and all the your links, you're asking for links and to various societies?
Well, the only thing that's in the draft now are an example that I put in that I have, which when I think of the entire country of Norway, isn't very encompassing. And since we all come from, or most of us come from different portions of Norway, it would make sense to take advantage and then compile what everyone would be willing to say, hey, this is the Genealogical Society of Tromsø, and here's their journal. And so all the manuscripts that are in those journals from, I'll say 1903 on, so over 100 years, I'm making this up, could, cover several of your ancestors just through the manuscripts that the authors have published. So anyway, that was my thinking.
So we'll send you this PowerPoint with email addresses. And so please respond with suggestions and links and whatever you think would be helpful. And we'll sort it out, and then we'll leave it up to Alex for how it gets organized on the website. But it's also a good point to take a look at our website. It's been improving, and Alex has done a really great job. You can usually find the recording of the most recent meeting on the GEG website. So we're running a little bit over, but we had this really interesting offer from Lori Jaghlit to talk about a particular brick wall that she's been dealing with. Really welcome, Lori, to this meeting. I see you quite regularly on the reading group, and in fact, Lori has been the facilitator for many of the discussions on the reading group lately. So welcome, Lori, and I think I made you. Did I make you a co-host? Are you able to share your screen?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to try this and hopefully I'll be able to pull up what I need to here. Let's see. So share screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, I need to make you a co-host.
Okay. So anyway, my brick wall kind of starts with a relative who came to the US, and he's my great uncle, and he went down to Arizona to work in the copper mines, along with another one of his brothers who was unfortunately killed in a copper mine down in Mexico. But this particular guy, and let's see if I can share my screen now. Oh Lord, is that all mine? Oh, good Lord, hang on. Now I gotta find the right one. Okay, I'm just gonna go there. Can you see that?
Not yet.
There should be a green share screen.
Okay,
tab.
so it's not sharing at all? I can see what it's supposedly sharing, but basic advanced file. Oh, I see. Okay, let's see now if this will work.
There we go.
Okay, now please don't look at my messy desktop here, but okay, can you see that?
Hmm.
Okay, so this is my website for my dad's side of the family. And so I have all the generations and different stories and different, you can see letters from home and everything. But anyway, so they ended up down in Bisbee, Arizona. And the guy that I'm looking for, his name is Ludwig, and he took the name Peterson for his last name. And he also went by Lewis when he was down there. Well, Lewis just disappears at about 1917, and there's the letters home stopped, everything stopped. And there's nobody knew anything about what happened to Lewis. So I kept looking and looking, and then I had his World War I registration card, and on that it said that he worked for the Phelps Dodge mine. And then I found this information about the Bisbee deportation that took place July 12th, 1917, where basically there was a bunch of people that were organizing to strike for, you know, healthier things at the mine and so forth. And the sheriff of the town, the Phelps Dodge Company, hired him to deputize 500 men, and they did that. And they one morning at 5 a.m. they went and they gathered, they, you know, went into people's homes and took them, anyone who they thought was going to be striking and anyone who was on any kind of level agitation or whatnot. So they took them all to the stadium, and then they put them on a boxcar and took them to the middle of the desert in New Mexico and tried to dump them at a military installation that was along the border there. And the military said, no, we're not accepting them. So they took them a little further down the road and dumped them in the middle of the desert and left them there and told them, don't ever come back to Bisbee. And it was quite a few men. So I thought, oh my God, could he have been one of those men? So I dug deeper, and there's his draft card where it says that he worked for that company. And here's a letter that he wrote home on him on his new Harley, which I love that picture. But anyway, and he was very happy and very, you know, proud of everything that he had done there. And so it wasn't the type of guy that would have just walked away. Anyway, so I found the list of all the men who were deported. And sure enough, there's a Louis Peterson, and he's Norwegian, and he fits all of the criteria so far for my Louis. And I just can't imagine there being too many Louis Petersons down in Bisbee, Arizona at the time. And there were only 4 Norwegians that were deported among all those men. And so then I found more, these are court cases filed on behalf of all the people who were deported against the United States government. And of course, they were thrown out. Then also I found this congressional record where he's listed as a draft dodger, which just freaks me out because he registered to go, and I do believe he probably would have gone. I mean, his brother went, or, you know, didn't go over there, but he had served before. And then, so there's nothing. And I mean, you find different things about what happened after they dumped him in the desert, and the president got involved and sent the military over there. And they did build a camp for these guys, and the military did feed them and take care of them for a number of months, and until they could try to figure out what to do with them. And remember, these men had families back in Bisbee. A lot of them had kids, wives, houses, everything. But they were told not to come back or they'd be killed. And, this was during the time where, they were worried about, the copper production for the war effort. There's all kinds of politics involved in this. But anyway, then I found Ole, his brother, who died in the copper mine in Mexico, but that was in 1922. But in his obituary, it listed that he had another brother in another part of the West. And that could either, technically that's only going to be Ludwig or Louis, because the other brothers were accounted for. My grandpa was in Minnesota and he's listed there, and the sister in California. And anyway, and so the only other brother in the other part of the West could be Ludwig, but nothing. There's not a single thing that I can find. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any ideas. To not be able to find a death record or anything on him. And just the fact that the letters home seem to have stopped too, kind of makes me think he maybe was not around. But it's kind of strange that the living siblings didn't seem to have a grasp of where he was either, because they just said another brother out in the West. So Louis keeps me awake at night. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on where I could find him, but he's my definite brick wall. And it's just such a strange story, but an amazing part of history that I was excited. I'm still planning a trip to Bisbee to try to find out more. Just because it's, I think, an awful part of our history, but yeah.
So there were 4 years between when he might have disappeared and when his brother died and had that obituary.
Yeah, 4 years.
Hmm.
And I found a Ludwig. I found a couple that were possible leads one was in Montana, but then when I chased that one down, it just, it didn't jive. The dates were all wrong. And I found one in New York City, but with the same birthday as him. But just too many discrepancies there that didn't make it seem like it was him. And I just can't believe that, like, my grandpa, and now my grandpa died when I was only 2 years old, so I never knew him. And but it's like they didn't talk about things much, because my dad only remembered the one brother who died in the mine. Yeah, he didn't know a lot about the other ones. So it was strange, but
it reminds me of it's Cochise County, right? So it reminds me of the OK Corral. And there's a lot written about that, and newspapers had a lot to do with that narrative. Competing newspapers. It's hard to believe that you couldn't find newspaper writings about such a significant event.
Yeah, because it was just so politically charged right then, but here's some of the men that were at the camp, out in the middle of nowhere and waiting to be able to go somewhere. And I keep looking at that picture, trying to see if I see them, but I don't, so far I haven't, but
they look healthy and clean.
Yeah. Well, it's just a sad situation, but.
Did the Army have any closing records on these folks? Because 1917, we were still in World War I.
Well, and another problem with that area is there was a fire at some point, and so a lot of documents were gone, because Ole, the one who died in the mine, he had a daughter that was just 2 weeks old when he died, and her birth records were destroyed in the fire. And that poor woman was not able to go to college in America because they said she had no proof to say she was born in America. And it wasn't until 1973 that she was able to get a document from the government saying that she was in fact born in Bisbee, not in Sonora, Mexico. But yeah, and so yeah, it was a messy time. I don't know.
Did your guy have a family in Bisbee as well?
No, he was single. But he had his brother Oli and his sister Pearl, and yeah, they were there together, you know, up until Oli died, and then Pearl left and went to California. But yeah, just don't know what happened to this guy. Like, I can follow everybody else all the way back, but
Could the military have offered enlistment to some of those guys and they took them up on it?
there's no record of anything. I mean, when you dig and dig, and that's why I want to go to Bisbee, because they do have a historical group that has been putting a lot of stuff together about this. And I did reach out to them, but I didn't hear back. But I thought maybe they would have, you know, more records like that. But when you dig around online, it's like these men just vanished, and there's no record of where they went after they were at that camp and who did what with them. And so I thought maybe he went over to Mexico and just had a wonderful life there. But you would think that he would have at least written home to his mom and his brothers that were still home.
What about the National Archives?
Which part of that do you think I might?
Well, because the federal government was involved, there should be information in the National Archives.
Well, I think I might have that might be where I got some of those lawsuit documents, and you know, that he was listed as a draft dodger. Yeah, no, that was a congressional record. Yeah.
This might be kind of a wild thought, but if the family never heard from him, you know, in 1918 there was a huge influenza epidemic in the United States, and lots of people died. Could he perhaps have passed away and just nobody knew?
Yeah, but there would be a death record somewhere.
You would think, if you knew where to look for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. And again, if he died, and maybe he went back to Bisbee and died there, and maybe the records were lost. But the cemetery there, you know, there's 2 cemeteries there, and I've gone through every gravestone in the entire cemetery looking for him, and I cannot find him, to save my soul. So,
But maybe he didn't have a stone, because my great grandfather died in North Dakota, and there's no stone. There was no money for a stone. There was nobody to put a stone there.
I don't know.
Any church records, possibly?
No, I don't even think. And they were part of a what do you call it? The Odd Fellows or whatever. What do they call those groups? Kind of like the Masons and that. Yeah, they were part of because Oli's funeral was held at one of those temples, but I don't think they were, you know, church going. I don't think. Yeah, but yeah, this isn't the one that tells.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Joining the military might explain how a guy would get from there to New York City.
Yeah, that's true. I gotta go back to that one, I guess, and see if. But I mean, because it was just that the birthday is exactly the same, but that was the only. I mean, everything else just seemed really far-fetched, and that it wouldn't have. Yeah, but I'll have to keep looking, I guess. But yeah, if you think of anything else, I mean, I'd appreciate any help I can get, because it's like 1917, he just disappears.
So your guy was born what year?
Let's see, Lewis was, I gotta remember, 1890, November 15th. Yeah. See, they never stuck with a single name either. That makes it hard when they flip-flop between Ludwig He did
Mhm.
Ludwig, D-I-G,
Mhm.
W-I-G, and he did B-I-K, and and then Peterson, and yeah. Well,
But Arizona would have had death records, right?
yep.
In some of the nearby states
Yeah,
at that time,
yeah, yeah. And I
except
checked,
for the name changes, yeah.
yeah, I checked the nearby states, thinking that he must have stayed close, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a sad.
You know, for free, you can contact the Family Search Library and they will do a personal 20-minute conference with you and try to give you ideas or look things up for you.
Okay. And they have a phone number you just call, and then
Yeah, there might be a form that you fill out or a call, but just go to the Family Search website and look for that little marking. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I could share that with after this. I can look it up and share it
okay.
with Joel. He could send it.
Yeah, you pick an appointment time and then the designated expert sends you a Zoom meeting notice.
Okay.
And it's very precise because I guess they do it a lot, and it's 20 minutes, and that's your allotted time basically.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. That could be a definite. Yeah. Well, thank you. And I will try those
I
later.
read a couple of books, at least a couple about Wyatt Earp in that county, and a lot of authors who write books about that particular story, the newspaper is playing a huge role in the resources of those books. I gotta believe there's something there.
Well, on the day that they did this deportation, they actually shut down the whole city. They closed the telegraph, they closed all communication. There was nothing going in or out of the place. It was this planned effort to keep the news from going anywhere. They were just going to do this, and you know, whether it was legal or not, or whether, you know, and they did it. And they closed the telegraph, they closed the newspapers, they refused to allow people to print anything about it until later, obviously within a few days when Washington got involved. Then, you know, once it had gotten out that far, then there were a few things, but it's very, very anti-union, you know, because it's a copper mining town. And yeah, they pretty much ran the show. They ruled everything, you know. So yeah, but so yeah, I mean, I've looked around, but again, it's like it's just a strange part of history that there's not a whole lot written about. Yeah.
What was the date when he enlisted, or rather registered for?
Yeah, it was, I believe, June, let me see. Yeah, June 15th, 1917. And the deportation was July 17th, I think. July 12th.
Like it, yeah.
Yeah, same year. So like a month different. So I mean, I think he had every intention of, you know, doing what he had to do for the draft, but then again, who knows? I don't know, you know, maybe he saw the opportunity to get out of there, and but again, where did he go? And I mean, has anybody done anything with Mexico records to find anything in Mexico? I think that might be too. Yeah. Even though I just have a feeling if he would have gone to Mexico, he would have still written home. And that's why I just think he died somewhere. And I, you know, because it just seems like, you know, except for the thing in Ole's obituary about another brother somewhere in the West, you know, it was, yeah.
Well, maybe that's it. It's somewhere in the West wasn't meant to be specific because they knew and they didn't want to say.
Oh, maybe. Yeah,
For
maybe.
the converse, I mean, I've got families that have gotten separated and they just don't seem to keep track of each other. Over the time, they just, I guess, go their separate ways, justified or not. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's strange. I don't know. Like I said, nobody really talked much about these people. And that's why when I started digging on my dad's side, it was like shocking. I didn't realize how many brothers my grandpa had. He had a lot more than I knew about. And it was, kind of a surprise, but because, yeah, they were scattered around. And
Didn't you mention a sister in California?
yeah, he had two sisters, one who was in Minnesota, but she died very young in Minnesota. And then the other sister, she lived to be 90 some in California.
I wondered if their children or grandchildren have any information.
No, and I even, let me show you this since we're here. If this will work. This was really crazy. This is Oli's side. I put this page together just to kind of show the family how I tracked Oli down. And anyway, and then when I found out about his kids and so forth, I reached out on Facebook and I found, so it would be Oli's grandchildren. And they sent me a whole bunch of pictures. I found them on Facebook and they sent me tons of pictures of Oli's two children when they were growing up and just tons of information. And then here's Oli's son, Charles. He was killed in a mine also. So it's kind of sad. Both of them were killed in mines. Yeah. And here's the delayed birth certificate of Oli's daughter, who was just a baby when he died. And yeah, there they are. And then here we are. This is Oli's great granddaughter and great great granddaughter, and I met them online on Facebook, and they live 15 minutes from me, if you can believe that. So once COVID finished, we met for coffee, but that was so crazy.
That's funny.
Yeah. So that was amazing. But yeah, so you never know how these things are going to play out. But so, I mean, but they didn't know, because Oli wasn't in the picture, from the whole time they were growing up, because they were just, Charles was 4 and the baby was 2 weeks old when he died, but yeah, it was pretty interesting digging, but I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So
You've done a lot of good work.
yeah, it's amazing. It's interesting. Very interesting.
A lot of fun. Yeah. And even, the stories, like somebody was saying earlier, like when you stumble onto these just random stories, it's crazy. Like even just the military service, I pulled up, of course we have all my uncles that were in World War II, and then my dad and his mom. And so she had 3 sons in the war at the same time. And then my uncle Dick was taken prisoner in a Nazi camp. And then his wife has all these notes right here are notes that she took while he was prisoner, and she would just keep this little journal. So I have all that and the telegram showing when he was taken, and then his grave. And then here's Charles. This is Oli's son. And he was a part of the Black Panther, the 66th Infantry Division, which is another fascinating story. And I hope I'm not taking too much time, but on Christmas Eve, 1944, they were going down to France to relieve the people that were fighting the Battle of the Bulge. And one of the ships, the Leopoldville, was torpedoed by a U-boat. And it took 2.5 hours, but it sunk, killing 784 enlisted men. And let's see, the bodies of 493 were lost. But anyway, these poor guys that survived, they were told that they could not talk to anybody about what happened because of morale in the war and so forth. And they told them that even when they got out of the service, when the war was over, that if they talked to any media or anybody about what happened, that they would lose their pension, their military pension. And they had to sign a paper saying that. And they said when he came back from the war, he had a lot of PTSD type symptoms. So poor guy. Yeah. But anyways, really interesting stories. And that was my brother. He died in Vietnam. But so I did a page for the military service in the family, just for here, you know, but yeah. Yeah. So anyway.
What software are you using?
This is a website, what's the WordPress.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's real easy to do. And I had to make mine private because I had a couple relatives who didn't want their pictures out on the web and stuff. And so I was like, okay. But so I mean, yeah. So there's just a lot of.
So in putting that together, you said you used WordPress, that software. So then you upload it then to another site?
Yeah, you can upload everything. You can upload like picture, like that's the whole family, and just here's where everybody's from roughly, and the name of the family names, you know, and so forth. And this was a fun website too that had where you could put in where are all the Pedersons living in the world. And yeah, and there's another one. I'll have to look that one up because my family name is Orgisvik on my dad's side. And, you know, they changed it to Peterson or Pedersen when they came here. But but it's one of those protected names. So in Norway, they have what are called protected names where only, I forget how many people have the name. And so if I went back to Norway and wanted to take my old family name, I'd have to get permission from everyone with that name in order to do that, which is odd, but I wouldn't probably be doing that. But yeah, so, but yeah, and you can do a lot. Like but you can put letter, I mean, you can upload so many things and just make it very personal. And you know, they different cards that they sent and things like that. And even all my dad's letters when he was in basic training and things like that, and my brother's letters. I mean, it was great to go through and read, you know, all these letters again and be able to put them on there for people to have forever. So it was kind of nice.
So you had it, you did not have it private initially, and that's how you were found by
No,
relatives?
No, I reached out to them on Facebook. That's how I found them. This has always been private. Yeah, this has always been private. But yeah, so then I'm working on different stories. Like we have the relative who brought the potato to Norway. So I have a story about him and things like that. And then it's really nice too. Like I have all up to 4 generations right now. But so what I could do here is you can do the family fact sheets. And so if my sister wants to have it, she can click on that on the paternal side, and it'll pull up this sheet, which has everybody's information. There's my great grandpa, my great grandma, and here comes my grandpa's siblings and all their information, where they were born, where they died, everything. And that's taken right off the MyHeritage website. But yeah, so you can have those, and then whoever wants to can just print them out online. And so it's pretty handy. There's a lot of possibilities with this software. But
it seems like there's a good deal of interest in building a family website. I wanted to ask GIG members, would you be interested in talking about this further in another meeting?
Yes.
That'd be great.
yeah, sure. And
How to do it. And,
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Like this was my COVID project, but I mean, and so I mean, I stayed busy for what, 2 years between digging up all the different stories and then making the web page. So, and I mean, they still have a lot to go on. There's still a lot of things I can add to it, but yeah.
Well, but if hypothetically, you know, Joel and I could talk with you about scheduling something
Yeah, sure.
for a talk just on the website,
Okay.
getting Alex involved too, since he's our website guru.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not like a super pro, but there's a lot of, knocking your head against the wall here and there. But yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to show what I've done anyway. And then we can go from there.
That'll
Yeah.
be very interesting.
Okay. Anyway, well, thank you guys for the ideas for, I will definitely do the family search thing because I think, and I have to revisit the guy in New York, even though I'm pretty sure I beat him to death with searching through things, but yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but if you're ever out there and you hear of anything on Bisbee, let me know. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Lori. It was interesting, not only for the brick wall mystery that you gave us, but also for methods and how to find people and things like that. Good luck. Good luck searching for what's his name? Ludwig
Louis Ludwig. Yeah.
Any other discussion here before we shut this down? Well, thank you all for hanging in with us. I think we had some very interesting presentations
Very
and
much so.
I think I mean, I think it's interesting listening to all of you talk about your families and where everybody came from. But there's always, as Alan, I think, pointed out, there's always a little nugget of, there's a website I hadn't thought about or I hadn't been to yet. Or there's always something to learn from these things. So I appreciate that. As I said earlier, we'll send the notice out pretty soon for the September meeting, which will be, what's his name? Troy Smith. Is that right, Alexis? Who's the Nordic Studies guy at the Library of Congress. He spent most of his time dealing with Denmark, but that's all right. He went to St. Olaf, which makes him close enough. And we'll learn about what resources they have, and I think we might be able to give some advice about. He's in the process of trying to accumulate more Nordic books and some antiquarian books and that type of thing. So maybe we can give him some suggestions about what kinds of things the library should be trying to acquire.
The library even collects like the little booklets that are done for anniversaries of churches. Like their 50th anniversary, 75th anniversary, something like that. The old ones, the library likes to get those.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was just curious am I the only one in the Midwest here today?
Where are you?
Minnesota.
Oh,
We're all in Minnesota in some way.
I come from that area, but I'm in Maryland.
I grew up in Minnesota.
Yeah,
I
maybe
was the region, do a lot of research in Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota.
The reason I ask is that Gary mentioned the Phyllis Rod website in the comments there. It's not a high budget website, but if you put some time into it, you'll realize there are a lot of logs and they're in this area and they're based on there's one for the Sogne Fjord, but there's also another one for Sogndal. I mean, there are a lot of overlaps. There were political problems in ancient history when it comes to logs with treasuries and their libraries, because they all have their own libraries and they don't want to give them up. It's something of value, just like their treasury. So that's why there are quite a few of them, and they're not terribly big. And whether they like it or not, they have to consolidate because frankly, we're all dying off. So, but they are around and they meet annually. I just came from a meeting in Spring Grove a weekend ago, and I had a lot of fun. And it's you know, from a cultural standpoint and running into to friends, you know, again, year after year. But there's those resources are floating around in Minnesota, and you don't know until you go scratching around in these organizations. You're not going to, I don't know where you live, but that's why I'm saying I live here and I can bump into these people and say, oh, you have a library. Oh, you have that hard to find big to book. Can I look at it? You know, and you're not going to find that in Virginia or Maryland or North Carolina or wherever you are right now. And believe it or not, there's quite a few of them, but they're kind of around my part of the world. And it might be interesting for you guys to make a trip to get, you know, the dues are like, I don't know, $25 a year. I think I belong to 5 different ones. And a lot of those people belong to each other's, you know, and
Have their annual meeting in the summertime, and then they bring their big books to the annual meetings.
exactly.
Mhm.
Which is kind of how I got hooked up with probably 5 different ones, because I was bopping around looking at each one's little library. And you know, they said, well, why don't you join our group? which isn't a big deal. It's just that it's not like, oh, I can go to UW-Madison or I could go up to UND because they have a huge libraries. They do, but there's more, you know, these little gems floating around, and you can find a lot of them on that website that you offered up, even though they're not very descriptive. You almost have to email the president of each one and say, they're based on geography, so there's no point if it's way up in the north and you don't come from there, there's no reason to chase that. But you might find 3 that cover your family's geography in Norway. And if you contact all 3 presidents and say, hey, when do you get together? Anybody have a library? How do I join? When do you know, stuff like that.
And sometimes if you contact their genealogist, they'll look up something for you.
Yeah, sure.
Well, can you share the ones that you belong to? And maybe, I mean, maybe it'd be worth looking into some of those and joining them, just to not only just to support them and their efforts, but yeah, be able to maybe find some more stuff.
Alan, are you finding that any of them have published inventories of their library contents?
You know, I'm not so sure if they publish a list. I think oftentimes what it is somebody has a personal collection of books that got out of hand, and they became the library for their most favorite log, and they just started adding to it. So maybe they have 3 big Tupperware bins of books that they lug in and out of a church at the annual meeting kind of thing, and people poke around in it, and they're pretty good at deciphering what's in there. This year I learned about Lens, Google Lens. You can take a picture with your phone of a page of a big book and it will translate it for you immediately. You don't even have to tell it what language it is. I just learned that this year. Like, where have I been? I don't know how long it's been out there on the market, but if I hadn't have bumped into this person, matter of fact, she's the wife of a guy I used to go fishing with in the 90s. I saw her name. And I said, hey, are you the wife of Paul Hope? Well, yeah. You know, I was like, you can't make this stuff up. And so she told me about Lens, Google Lens, and how you can translate. Like, it's just an accident. That's how a lot of my life in this genealogical world is just an accident, one after another. And some of them really pan out good. And, you know, a lot of them don't necessarily, but they might for you, you know. And if Alexis is gonna make a list of all these little nuggets, I mean, that'd be great, but it seems overwhelming to me. You know,
Well,
that
hopefully it won't be like, 1,001, but really significant items, especially with the personal impact. And I was going to suggest, but just before you said that sounds like this could be your initial offering to this part of the website content.
I'm happy to, but if it already exists at that Fellows Road website, man,
No,
that's what
Lens.
Lens, yeah, definitely.
think
All
you-
those little tricks. Yeah.
How would I do that? You need you need a phone. You download the Google app called Lens. I don't know how it works on Apple, but it works.
Yeah, send me an email about the app and you'll be our first piece of content in the draft.
If you have an Apple phone and you take a picture of anything that has text on it, you will see this funny little marking on your photo. You tap on that, it will select all the text. You can copy it and paste it into Google Translate. Even though it was, as far as you could tell, it was embedded in a photo, but it will work. It's fantastic. I use it all the time.
Also, not only can you take a picture and then you're looking at your phone at the translated text that you just took a picture of, but you can share that. You can share it with yourself in the form of an email, so when you go home, it's there waiting for you. And then once it's in your email, you can edit it. It'll give you the Norwegian version and it'll give you the English version. And unfortunately with Big2Books, because they were published quite a long time ago, it's not pretty. So you're going to have to, you know what I mean? The translation's not pretty because it's not modern Norwegian. So you're going to have to do a little bit of reading between the lines, but it's better than beating yourself up over, with a dictionary trying to figure out sentence by sentence by sentence. You're just going to be filling in a few blanks. But
now if we can just get AI to read old Gothic text, we'll be all set. The handwriting,
Yeah, does it read, I don't know what it's called, the old sort of Gothic typeset, whatever it is. Can't
I don't
remember.
know. I haven't tried it. I should try that.
I don't know that I have tried that either.
Because
But
almost everything I deal with is handwritten. So that's why I want an AI program to read the old writing. Ooh, this is challenging.
I bet it's a matter of time. I mean, look, you can cash a handwritten check and they get it right almost all the time. I don't know why that isn't in the works.
Yeah, I agree.
Does it do Nynorsk?
Yeah.
They have
And
your
that-
bank card in first, so they know who you are. And they have bank routing codes and bank numbers.
Right, but the handwritten part is read. It's fascinating how
Yeah.
it can do that.
Yeah. Hey, before everybody leaves, I have a question just for future meeting planning. Did you find the discussion on brick walls and intriguing ancestors and immigrating ancestors interesting enough that we should do another meeting format like this, say, next year?
Yes.
I found this interesting.
Okay, well then we need some volunteers. So start thinking.
So I wanted to congratulate Alan on being appointed to the board of directors for one of these logs.
Oh, Alan, you've just let yourself in for more work.
Oh, I know it.
It's fun though.
The one log that this was a Sognefjord log, and some of my ancestors came from this area, Vik and Sogndal and some other places, but I belong also to a Hordalang log, which doesn't have an annual meeting like this, so there's not a fun weekend per year. A lot of them have pared down to where now they meet at the Vestlands log annually in June. And the last one was in Austin, Minnesota. And then the small ones that don't have their own fun weekend usually have like a 2-hour meeting of their own at the Vestlans log long weekend. And the downside is if you belong to multiples, which one are you going to sit in on? They all have their own libraries. They all have their own, fan club, and it's kind of fun. I mean, they have tours and talks and presentations and things. Those are the kind of groups that are fun for me. The other ones are more just you get a newsletter once a year, and they have a library. That's kind of why you're paying your dues, is for the newsletter and the library, because they don't really get together otherwise.
Do
But
any
unless
of them do Zoom, like a format like this?
no, they don't.
Mhm.
They're a smaller time than us here.
Mhm.
I find this group, I bumped into Joel a few years back, and he sent me links to this group, and I was just amazed. I was kind of gobsmacked at the quality of Zoom meetings that were available. Again, it's one of those I bumped into somebody things. And that's how I make leaps and strides, I find, is not so much my work, because that's just a little bit of filling in the gaps. It's these bumping into somebody things that really pays off. And here in Minnesota, the logs just don't do that, but some of them have some fun long weekend things that can pay off. And I learned a lot about, say, Spring Grove, Minnesota, which is the first Norwegian settlement in Minnesota, because that's where our meeting was. And a local historian guy who is the director of the Giants of the Earth Heritage Center right on Main Street gave a talk. And I was like, wow, there's a lot going on here in this corner of Minnesota that I never knew of. And I've spent most of my life here.
I would love to hear when those are, because I have family on my mom's side that were involved down in that area back in the early 1800s. So that would be really interesting. So if you can maybe just even in our email or something, we could get notice from you when that's going to be. I try to come to Minnesota like 4 times a year, but I mean, I would definitely plan it around that, because that sounds fun.
Joel, can I look up websites and somehow relate it, give it to you, and you?
Sure. I'll be happy to send it around.
I got to run, but thank you everybody for everything. I really appreciate your help. And
Thank
take
you.
care. We'll see
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, this was a good meeting.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm going to stop recording. I guess if I just close the meeting, it'll stop recording. Here we are.
Thank you all. Thank you.